You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 287th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 941st episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of April 20th, 2023. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Well, this wasn't exactly the week IU fans were hoping for. With plenty of optimism in the air about Chris Ledlum's recruitment ever since his official visit, many IU fans were stunned and disappointed when Ledlum ended up committing to Tennessee, me included. I mean, it's not like an IU athletic program has ever lost a commanding lead late in a competition with Tennessee before, right? Damn it. Anyway, securing Ledlum's two-way production and intangibles for next season was supposed to be this week's banner moment. That it didn't come to pass certainly makes for a bit more somber gathering this week. And while Indiana struggles to get proven wings in the fold is a concern, it's important to remember that all is not lost simply because the number 53 ranked player in the portal decided to play elsewhere. It's easy to forget that Indiana has already secured the signed commitment of the portal's number 2 player, center Khalil Ware, who will step into the massive void left by Trace Jackson Davis's departure. So let's indulge our disappointment in Ledlum's decision and try to figure out where IU goes next on the wing. But it's silly to pretend like this portal season has been anything close to a failure yet for IU. It's already yielded some positive results, and now the staff will have to pivot quickly to ensure more positive results follow, but with a lot of value to dangle in front of its future targets. Which makes the real banner moment for this week basically each time a new name pings in the transfer portal, which remains open until mid-May. And there has been chatter in several places about some good players who could still enter, with fewer big dogs sniffing around those new entrants as commitments are made and options dry up. It's not an ideal spot to be in for IU, which would have much rather landed Ledlum and gotten someone like Dalton Connect on campus, but it is at least some reason to remain calm, stay patient, and let the entire recruiting period play out. All right, now let me introduce my co-host this week. Folks, Ryan is off this week. He was going to be here, but he's very distraught over losing his blue check mark on Twitter. It's been a rough day for Ryan. Please hold a warm thought in your head during this very difficult time as he tries to adjust to just being a normal Twitter peasant like the rest of us. But here with me, to my left, he is the Rick Barnes of girls youth sports coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and a renowned bracketologist with enough self-respect to not publish way too early brackets in April.
The best of youth sports coaching, you know that we got 'em. When it comes to analytic trends, you know he can spot 'em. For first-class bracketology, if you want the top, you gotta go bottoms. If you want the top, you gotta go bottoms. If you want the top, you gotta go bottoms.
That's right. Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week at Indiana basketball?
Well, I mean, like you said, not really a lot of news, at least not of the positive variety. So move on and move to other targets in the portal, but certainly a lot of offseason left. I think we talked about this a little bit with the Peyton Sparks commitment. That one came fast, and it wasn't. They're not done. This isn't the end. Don't feel like this isn't what you hoped it would be. And I think the same thing can hold true now. You in this case, you didn't get somebody who a lot of fans had gotten attached to, apparently, and over the course of a few weeks since learning that he was a live human, and so now you move on to somebody else. There's certainly holes to fill on the roster, but I think just a lot of offseason left. They're not done. Certainly, the player pool, while still large, has dwindled a little bit at the top, but I still think they're be some opportunities out there for guys to come in, still opportunities for other guys to get in the portal that aren't even available right now. So I think a lot of off season left to play out. And so we'll see. I think everybody knows there's certain holes on the roster that need to get filled. And while it wasn't some of the guys that had come into the collective IU consciousness over the last couple of weeks, it'll be somebody else. And you never know. Sometimes the guys that you don't get work out to be there. Turns out something better is out there that maybe is a better fit or something else. So just kind of stay the course and see what happens next.
All right, and to my right, he's a longtime high school basketball coach in the state of Indiana, the founder of Delphi Bracketology, and Hoosier Nation's most famous porch dancer.
Shavito!
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
It is Tonsoni time. What is on your mind, Coach?
This week's just an example where it's best just to wait till the recruits are all signed and the roster is somewhat finalized, and then go dive in to try to be excited or disappointed or whatever. But the up and down nature of the portal is hitting all of the places that we consume Indiana news. We hear of a Zoom call, we rush to watch the videos, we fall in love with him because he's connected with Indiana, then we're disappointed if he doesn't come, and just rinse and repeat. It's tough to be patient in this day of news and information, and so you battle that. But the biggest concern is that Indiana really wanted this guy, and they didn't get him. But also, Rick Pitino didn't get him at St. John's. So, everyone calling for Woody's head and all this kind of stuff is absolutely ridiculous for me because, there's only one winner, and these guys are really the best players in the portal are really targeted by a lot of good schools, and a lot of good schools end up being told no by the recruit. I think we just need to try to remember that. You are concerned with, we've gotten 2 bigs and not any shooting and wings. That is a legitimate concern for those people who are on that side. And then the other thing, I'm going to transfer my thoughts over to, if you're in or around Bloomington, go check out the softball team, the baseball team, the spring sports at Indiana. Beautiful to be on campus at these events, but boy, baseball is in the discussion to be hosting a regional after, the COVID situation really set them back, and softball has lost a few recently, but went on a long winning streak. So good facilities, a lot of fun, good people to sit next to and talk at those games. So, the IU sports spectrum is not all a struggle because the portal's not there. There's some positive things. There's just Coach Mercer is doing a fantastic job. So make sure you go find some positives with Indiana athletics while we're waiting this portal situation.
Man, after Coach got so much airtime on BTN the other night at the Illinois game, really, I mean, thanks for still showing up, Coach. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And then you got Little 5 coming up. Whoever the next guys up on the list in the portal are, you better get those guys the hell to Bloomington here in the next 24 hours.
Exactly.
I know. No, the baseball team's great. Gosh, if we can just get our football and basketball teams rolling here, our athletic department will be pretty darn good. All right, here's what we have in store this week. We've got a few Hoosier headlines, but we're going to spend the majority of our time in segment 2 talking about the many angles of Chris Ledlum's decision and kind of what comes next for Indiana in the portal. And then we got several really good questions in the mailbag, and so we will hit those at the end. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But before we get to that, let's talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home field apparel, wear one for the team.
Yes, the fine folks at Home Field Apparel, who I guess now that the season's over, this was their 2nd season of sponsoring the Back Home Network. I guess now this is going to end up being their 7th season of sponsoring the Assembly Call. Been with us for a long time, and we really appreciate them as our sponsors and just what they do as a business and what they do serving not only the Indiana fan base, but college sports fan bases all over the place. And one of the things you're noticing about them is they are going on the road more. So I think last week they were in Georgia for the spring game. This weekend they are going to be in Bloomington for Little 5. I didn't see exactly where. Check on Twitter because they'll be posting up. You can buy shirts and gear at a discount when you go see them. And, I mean, you want to get stuff, whether you want to get a T-shirt for the summer upcoming, whether you want to stock up on stuff for the winter, crew necks and hoodies and all that stuff, whether you're buying gifts. I mean, Home Field Apparel really is kind of a one-stop shop because there's stuff there for anybody who's an Indiana sports fan, and they have 140, 150 different schools with great vintage logos that they've pulled out of the archives and breathed new life into. They print them on comfortable materials that last through many washings. And you're supporting a great company that came up through the Kelley School of Business. They employ a lot of folks in Indianapolis. They do great work. They have a great personality and have fun with it too. So just a lot going for our friends at Home Field Apparel. Make sure you check them out, homefieldapparel.com. You can use our promo code HOME to get 15% off your first order. That's homefieldapparel.com. Promo code HOME for 15% off your first order. Wear one for the team. All right, gentlemen, a few headlines to go through. One, in terms of Big Ten news, really the biggest item was Zach Edey announcing that he is going to be testing the NBA draft waters, but maintaining his college eligibility. Coach, I don't know if you're hearing anything up there in your neck of the woods. It seems like the general expectation is that he'll be back because I think most people feel like the NBA feedback he's going to get isn't great. And I think they're going to figure out, kind of an NIL situation with him up there at Purdue. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, obviously that is the biggest, literally and figuratively, domino that needs to fall in terms of the Big Ten. So any thoughts on Zach Edey's decision, and if you're hearing anything other than the consensus, which is that he'll probably be back?
No, I stay away from that campus as much as possible. So
good.
I don't try to eavesdrop on stuff. No, the interesting thing is with this NIL, which it seems like there are no rules on contacting players or what you pay or who pays or whatever anymore, that there is something with I think he has foreign residency from Canada, and there's some hangups with that, just like the young man, the Shwebwe at Kentucky. And so
they planned an event in the Bahamas so that he could do NIL stuff, I think.
Right. So it's not just so easy as finding someone in this area or a donor from the States to do that. They probably have to work around some way for him to, I don't know if it's a visa thing or whatever. I have no clue on that. I just know that has been said. So that'll be interesting. And then it's interesting on how he is going to be judged. 10, 15 years ago, he's a top 5 pick easily when it was, heavy center oriented. Now you wonder if he's going to get picked because the game has just gone so positionless and face up game. Do they want a roster spot and pay money for someone who has, a limited array of options for play? So I haven't heard anything. He is a Purdue guy, so I'm not. I hope he doesn't come back. But I just wish the best for the young man. You feel for him a little bit because he's just a victim of his time.
Yeah, there was some good discussion about the visa and that aspect. Norlander and Gary Parrish talked about that on the Iron College Basketball earlier in the week. They talked a little bit about that and how it had been an issue with Shwebwe. And I think even Sanogo from UConn, they talked about had some of those issues. It's one of those where you can really see it both ways. If they get the NIL situation figured out, you probably can make more, can continue to stay there, break records, do some of those kinds of things. From a basketball standpoint, I'm not sure what he can show when he comes back. I mean, are they going to have him start taking face-up jump shots? I sincerely doubt it, given how dominant he can be and where he can typically get post position inside. You know what I mean? Those are things. There are things that he could show, but I'm not sure those things are in the best interest of them winning basketball games. So I think that's the only thing that I would say. Now, a lot of times people talk about, you can poke. That just gives you another year to poke holes in his game. I mean, the holes in his game are what they are. I'm just not sure he's gonna fix those. I'm not sure you're gonna find new things that you think, this doesn't, isn't going to translate or whatever. I think, the book is kind of written on him, and it's really just a matter of, is there a team that thinks they can figure out a way to utilize him in the NBA? And if you've got a team or two who thinks they can do that, I'm not sure that changes dramatically one year to the next, but the monetary component of a team giving you, hey, we're going to take you in the second round, might make it more compelling, especially if there's still hurdles to get over from an NIL standpoint. But yeah, I think expectation would be that he would be back based on where he's projected in drafts and things like that. So that's kind of the working assumption for me at this point, at least.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting. That really is the big difference between he and Trace. Trace came back and there were a lot of things for him to show and improve. Obviously, we never saw the jump shot, but, being able to lead the fast break, being able to switch out onto the perimeter, being able to pass out on the post, like all the things that Trace added to his game, that now has him as a late first round or early second round pick in every mock draft that you look at. And yeah, you don't really see that there for Edey. It's not like he's going to start stepping out and taking jump shots or leading the pick and roll or anything. I mean, he's so just monstrously dominant at what he does. And he really is. And he's skilled and he's a good player. But yeah, I don't know, really what else there would be, to show. But make a lot of money and try and avenge what happened last year in the tournament. We'll see if that's enough motivation for him to come back. Other Big Ten big news, Hunter Dickinson visiting Kentucky. I think the only other Big Ten team I've seen linked to him is Maryland, as we wish for all of these other big guys to get out of the conference, just go somewhere else. So we'll see what happens with him. As far as Indiana goes with the portal, I know a lot of people have asked about Dalton Connect. Obviously that's a guy Indiana's talked to, they Zoomed with. The inability to get him on campus, really suggests that there's just nothing there. And a lot of people asked me this on Twitter today. I didn't get a chance to answer them. But, the Tennessee insider who initially posted that Ledlum was going to go to Tennessee when everybody was kind of surprised, also in that note, and I forget his name, so forgive me, he mentioned that Connect was kind of shutting down his visits and, going to kind of end, going out and looking at new schools. So haven't heard anything else there, but I'm certainly not holding my breath on it, and I wouldn't advise anybody else to do it either. Really with any of these. I mean, Coach, you kind of made this point. You hear about a Zoom and you start watching film. I mean, really, until a guy gets on campus, it's not serious, and so you just need to remember that. Cormac Ryan is another guy. I think everybody, when Ledlum said no, and, the news about Connect, continued to be kind of pessimistic, I think everybody turned their attention to Cormac Ryan. Tony Adragna did a great thread about him. He committed to North Carolina today. Nick Timberlake committed to Kansas. So essentially, a lot of the top line guards and wings that Indiana was looking at, they're off the board. And so the Hoosiers are kind of starting fresh from there. But that, those are kind of the major portal developments this week. Anything else stand out to you guys this week in the world of college basketball before we dive into Chris Ledlum's decision and what that means for the Hoosiers?
Not really for me. It sounds like Dickinson's talking with a lot of different people, so I don't know that it doesn't feel like a decision is imminent there, given the number of teams he's there. I guess he's from the DC area, which is why Maryland came up, which I don't think I knew, but heard that brought up. So nothing really there. Haven't seen any other major Big Ten comings or goings. It doesn't feel like. It's a lot of wait and see out there, at least in terms of impact guys. And I think what we've seen with IU is they cast a relatively thin net as opposed to a wide net, and we'll probably get into that a little bit in the next segment. I think there's arguments to be made on either side of that, and it's no different really with the portal than it is with recruiting. Do you go out and offer a ton of high school guys as you're going through, or do you really hone in on a few? If you get a lot of hits on the guys that you really want to spend time on and you really focus on, everybody thinks that's a great strategy. If you don't, then it's terrible, because then you're playing catch up at that point. And I think you found that probably with Ryan. They really weren't super in on him as a plan A. He was a plan B or a plan C. And by then he's too far down the road with somebody else. And you're really having to do that. And I think that's what they're going to have to try to figure out now. If whoever they've identified as the best remaining guys out there, a lot of them, I was looking through the Athletic last night, are not names that have been mentioned with IU to date. Doesn't mean that you can't get back in it, but because they focus so much on a few guys, all of a sudden you're not getting a couple of those guys. I think that is a little bit of why people are panicking a bit. And I don't know that anybody. It's easy to say now that's not the right approach to this, but that feels like hindsight, telling you what to do. I think you, on some level, want to be confident that you can get the guys you really want, and so it's just a debate on recruiting philosophy, whether it be in high school or in the portal.
Yeah. Well said, Andy. Go, Coach.
I just the multiple transfers are interesting to me. The kids on their third, fourth, fifth schools. I would like to see that tightened up. I'm all for kids having the opportunity to move. I think that's a good thing, but I think there are some things that the NCAA, if they even can legislate or can do it decently, need to tighten up a little bit of the NIL and a little bit of the transfer, because it is just simply wild, wild west with there is no tampering or whatever. I mean, people are calling people left and right. Your best friend's a head coach somewhere. You're trying to take his kids, and you're trying to make deals. And then state law is being passed all over the place. Colorado just passed a law that said the schools can now be directly involved in organizing NIL payments and conditions. So you're going to see a variety of state laws affecting programs, and it's always happened. We've discussed all of this, but I do think instead of just total woo out there go, I'd like to see it, and maybe it will just settle down in a couple years as everyone gets a hold of this thing. But it's someone in the chat just said, look at the portal, man. I went to the Athletic. I think, Andy, you said you mentioned that in a tweet or a text, and just started looking at players, and there's a lot of players, and a lot of players that I don't know. 6'7" wings that scored 11 points in college basketball. So there's some ability out there, and it's up to the staff to go and get it. But I'd like to see that tightened up a little bit here in the near future.
I think it will be. I mean, I think either it is going to be tightened up, or what is seeming increasingly likely is there's probably going to end up being actual revenue sharing between the universities and the athletes, especially in the revenue sports. I don't know exactly what that will look like, but it seems like that's the inevitable outcome here. Now, whether that means that certain schools have to split away from D1 and do their own thing, I don't know exactly what that will look like, but from an Indiana perspective, it certainly thinks like that is what we are hurtling toward. And we'll just have to kind of make sense of the wild, wild west portal and NIL situation that we have right now, which is undeniably exciting and interesting, but maybe not the healthiest thing for college sports fans who should probably be taking a little bit of time off after a long season. And now we're just right back into, especially for IU, the ebbs and the flows of, hey, we got Khalil Ware. Oh no, now we don't have anybody to start. And it's just, it doesn't leave you a whole lot of time to just kind of decompress from the season. So just follow the portal responsibly is what I would say, which is always easy to do. Not always easy to do. Okay, coming up here on the Assembly Call, guys, let's dive into Indiana's recent run of speed bumps in the transfer portal. What does it mean? How concerned are we? Is it time to panic? We'll talk about it. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Well, hello there, everybody. Nice to see so many of you here live with us as we dive into this. Always fun to be here with you guys. Kind of thought we'd have a little bit more exciting stuff to talk about. Entered this week, kind of planning out when's the emergency podcast going to happen. Is what's my schedule looking like, and none of that stuff really happened. So that's okay. And, that's the other thing with these transfer portal recruitments. They have such a speed dating quality to them. I don't think it's really surprising when, you kind of think something's going one way and then it veers the other way. There's just not that amount of time to really solidify things. And so, if you're not the last one to see a guy, that's always going to be a bit of a concern. And unfortunately, Indiana wasn't in this case. Alas.
Yeah, it's such a contrast. And I guess you could make the argument that because these guys have been through the quote unquote normal recruitment process, that they're able to maybe process some of those things quicker. But boy, you think about the amount of time that schools spend on guys in high school, and maybe that's going to shift away from that a little bit as this becomes such a huge part of roster building. But all the time spent to lay the groundwork to get a commitment from somebody. And then now it's like, all right, well, you got a week and you better figure it out, as opposed to years of going through it that way. And again, I think it's reasonable to assume that, a guy who's been in a major college basketball program probably has a little bit better idea of what they're looking for and what are the right questions to ask and what are the things that really matter to me that I understand now better than I did, in some of these guys' cases 3-4 years ago when they were coming out of high school. So maybe it's okay that it's shorter, but you got to put your best foot forward in a hurry and really catch somebody's attention in a hurry at that point.
Yeah, you do.
I just thought put your wide net versus a small net comparison too, that you still need to recruit high school and maybe branch out a little bit more in high school, not necessarily to get the high school commit, but to have at least a relationship or a connection with these kids that if they go to Ball State or if they go to Duquesne, and you don't want them right now. They don't think they're developed, but you're going to have to not just go after the top 50. You might want to go after 100 to 200 guys just because if they pop like a Peyton Sparks or something like that, you really have to really think on how to, build these connections, get these guys in for unofficial visits, let them see Assembly Hall, and then keep track of them. And I would imagine IU's doing that. They're watching all of the games and the players at small schools, mid-majors, and other big conference schools. But it really is you're going to have to really redesign, I think, the whole recruiting process because it's all going to be about relationships. And if we're speed dating and you have somewhat of a prior relationship a year or two early, I wonder if that can be the difference in some of these things. I'm not saying that was a situation with Ledlum or anything, but it just hit me when Andy was speaking there that there's a whole new way of doing this.
Absolutely. Not to mention, players now have unlimited official visits that they can take, and more staff members can be involved in recruiting.
Right.
Jordan Holes and Adam Howard and these guys can actually do stuff. So I think you're 100% right, Coach, because a lot of these, what happens when a guy enters the portal? People immediately look for, okay, what's the kind of established relationship? Who were his final couple, schools that he was looking at? Because that's a natural place to look. What coach does he have a relationship with? We got Xavier Johnson because Kenya Hunter had the pre-existing relationship with X. We had a chance for Kalel Ware because Coach Ya has connections in Oregon. And so a lot of that stuff is really going to be important here as we move forward. It is a different world, man.
I just want to say I've always liked Clint Eastwood movies for some reason, and it just popped up. He mentioned how beautiful my bald head is in the chat. So thanks for Clint Eastwood being in the chat this evening. That makes this
Clint
old
Eastwood
guy
too.
Yeah,
wow.
it makes it. No one ever called me beautiful. This is a monumental day.
Look at that
here for Coach Tonsoni.
Very nice. Coach has a beautiful bald head. He really does. Is the comment?
Yeah, I was not looking at the chat.
Amy,
so
get out of the
really,
chat.
So that really came out of left field. I thought this was like we were in the cockpit in an airplane, and it's like, do you like gladiator movies? And the coach is just sitting here. I really like Clint Eastwood movies. What do you guys think about it? Whatever. We're starting to lose him.
I think that's Amy's burner account.
That's funny. Okay. On that note, let's move on to segment 2. Here we go.
Hey, it's Romeo Langford. What's the only thing better than hitting a game winner to beat Wisconsin? Celebrate it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on Assembly Call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Romeo. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the man with the beautiful bald head, Coach Brian Tonsoni. Guys,
right.
let's talk. Let's talk about Chris Ledlum's decision, kind of the impact, what's next, all of that stuff. I think the first place to start is on Ledlum and the decision itself. There were a lot of questions coming in, and Coach, I know you had some of these questions and have expressed them on the show about how Ledlum would fit, especially when you kind of look at a projected starting lineup. Certainly you're penciling in Kalel Ware in there. I think you're naturally going to pencil in Malik Renew because he's certainly one of your 5 most talented players. And so Ledlum, a guy who's 6'6", is a capable shooter, but that's not really his main game. He's really more of a driver and a guy who scores in the lane and, is crafty and things like that. I think a lot of people wondered, okay, how is this guy going to fit at the 3? And I think that was a very valid concern, a valid question to have. But I think some people have gone a little bit overboard in that, and part of it is, you lose a guy, and so now everybody's looking at all the things that he can't do to make yourself feel a little bit better about it. The issue is, I think, for this roster right now, you were trying to replace Trace, and you think that, you may have done that with Khalil Ware, but you also have a lot of other production to replace with Jalen Hood-Schifino, Miller Kopp, and Race Thompson. And I think a lot of us agree that while we want to make Final Fours and have a roster that can make a deep run, what's especially important for this upcoming season is to keep the momentum going. Make the NCAA tournament. Raise the floor for this program. Stop having so much of the roller coaster ups and downs. The reason why I really liked Ledlum and really came around on him after being skeptical early on, and I think why the staff really liked him, is because of all the other stuff that he does. It's easy to kind of look at the shooting and just say, the shooting's not great, but all the other stuff and a lot of the intangibles, the experience and the toughness that you're losing with some of those guys, I think those are some of the things that the staff, really liked. And so the issue here now, Coach, is, what is the opportunity cost? All this time that you invested in Ledlum, he's not the perfect player, but he was certainly the most well-rounded player Indiana was going after. And you look out at the portal now, and we hope that there's more guys to come. And I'm going to share with you here in a little bit a list of guys who last year entered the portal after April 20th, because it's actually a pretty impressive list of guys. And so you do expect there to be some more guys. The issue is, are you going to find a guy as well-rounded as Ledlum? I say that's probably unlikely, and so I think that's why, to me, this one hurts, because I think Ledlum is a guy who would have raised the floor and done a whole lot of little things to help Indiana win. So it's not to say that you can't maybe find a better shooter for those spots and some of those things. That may be possible, but, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, I'm disappointed about this one because for a lot of the reasons why the staff really liked him, I really liked him too. And I think missing on him is going to be a difficult thing to make up for. It's not that Indiana can't, but I think, we get really caught up in we've got to have guys who can shoot. And that is true. You need shooting. But we also need wings who have a versatile offensive game and can do more than just one thing. And that, to me, is what he represented. So I'm disappointed. I thought he really would have helped the team. And we'll have to move forward, but I think it's worth at least lingering for just a moment on the reasons why the staff wanted this guy so much. And, is there going to be another guy who can bring all of those attributes to the team, even if there were a few weaknesses there that we wish were a little better?
Well, I'm going to throw this scenario out, and I'm not one of those guys that when he says no, then, we didn't want him anyway type of guy. You want talented guys, and the staff identified him, and so the time and effort, all of those things I totally agree with. But they went after versatile fours. They went after Battle and Ledlum right away when those guys hit the portal because they had Renew and they had Sparks. So there were 2 5s there, and then all of a sudden Ware pops. Like, you have to go after Ware. And so Ware and Ledlum come at the same time. And so now all of a sudden Ware was the first one to commit. And now you have to, and IU would still take him, but now you had to say there's limited time at the 4 all of a sudden, not as much time at the 4 as if it was Renew at the 5 and Ledlum at the 4. I'd have loved that. Like, I think that would have been a super great fit for all the intangibles. The face-up game. You could go with your 4-man coming off ball screens. He could drive in and bully people in off the drive. He can hit that spot up 3 and space the floor. I thought the reason I was excited about him was for that 4, that 4th wing, if you would, not the 3rd wing, if you would. So now all of a sudden, it's not a negative that they didn't get him, and I'm not saying the staff wouldn't have tried to fit him in somewhere and done a good job. But all of a sudden he becomes a Race Thompson with a dribble game. Now he becomes a Miller Kopp without the 3 with a dribble game. And I don't think his impact what was going to be as much, and that's just a gamble in this. You can't say no to Ware. Like, Ware's going to be, I think, really going to be fun to watch. But now that put pressure on that playing time at the 4. And you got another guy in Caleb Banks who can go down and play some 4 if needed in the Geronimo position, right? So I think that's why maybe he did not come, because now he can play the 3, but he knows that's going to be a new position for him. And even if he wanted to get to the NBA, I don't know what he's going to do at Tennessee. But that was my thinking there, is that they wanted him for the 4, and they fell in love with him for the 4 like I did. And then all of a sudden you got Ware, and now it's like, hey, still come here because now we'll put you into the 3. And I thought I can't speak for Coach Woodson and staff, but I would imagine that he was being recruited as a space out, drive the ball 4, and then we got Ware, and now we got to play Renew, and so now we got to work him into the 3. We're still want him, and he still could have been feasible. But I think maybe timing of that, the Ware recruitment might have played a role in the young man's decision, but it also changed the way I looked at Ledlum. If Ware goes elsewhere, then I really would have been disappointed if we missed out on that, because we missed out on Battle and that 4 that could either shoot or drive the basketball.
Yeah, fair. Andy, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think you're right in the sense that it would give you at least what you believe to be another proven commodity on the roster that's going to give you, you kind of know what you're getting to a certain extent. There's a range of outcomes, but there is a floor with what he would do versus now in the absence of getting somebody else for that spot, it really puts a lot more onus on the development of Caleb Banks and what he's able to do in that 3-4 role. It puts, a lot more on him as the roster sits currently. Not that they won't sign anybody else, but I joke with you guys before that everybody got so attached to a guy who could have walked in their living room 3 weeks ago and everybody had no idea who he was. And so I think there was a lot of things to like about him. I think with any of that, you really struggle to figure out how it's going to translate the way that he played at Harvard, the competition he played, those different things, like versus a guy like a Cormac Ryan that we talked about, like played in the ACC. Yeah. Style of play is different, but the kinds of athletes he's played against, what he's done. I think you have an even more clear idea of what you'd get out of a guy like that. Who maybe is less versatile or some of those kinds of things. But I do think you're not trying to figure out how he translates from one level to the next. And so that was always kind of the challenge with Ledlum. And I think when you started to talk about the shooting component, I think Coach brings up a interesting point about where he may have initially thought he was going to play. Then I think once IU got where everybody switched to, well, this guy then would have to play the 3. And that's where I think they brought in some of the questions about the shooting, and the spot up numbers were decent, but what does that really look like? Can he guard, 3s and things like that? But I also think the, ruggedness that he brought was probably a reasonable fit for the Big Ten. And so I think that's also the, the other side of it is I thought from a style of play standpoint and kind of the way he would play for the league games probably, fits pretty well. Does that get you where you want to be in the postseason? Maybe not, but this isn't going to be a team that in all likelihood has lofty postseason aspirations above and beyond just getting there based on what they have. And so it's kind of an incomplete. It's disappointing on the one hand because he was a guy that they targeted and things like that. Could you shift and get a couple guys who are more true wing shooter scorer type guys and feel like you got to cobble things together a bit more? And still feel okay about it. I think that you could. That forces almost a, so if you say, hey, we're going to get some guys and mix and match some of these pieces and figure it out, that takes Woodson a little bit away. We're already talking about, next year he's going to go away from running stuff through the post. Now does he go away from, hey, I'm going to run 7 dudes into the ground? And how much of that was a function of what he wants to do versus what he had to do? Because with a guy like Ledlum, you can pencil him in for a good number of minutes. I don't think who you're going to get, again, of the guys who are out there now, I don't know that you get a guy who you'd pencil in to take the same number of minutes that he has. So, but do you get enough guys where you can play some matchups and cobble things together to be successful? I think that you probably could, but again, it's another trying to figure out, okay, how does Woodson really want to coach? How does he really want to develop a team? How do they want to dole out the minutes and things like that? That again is going to be a pretty large departure from what we've seen this year and even last year to a certain extent.
I think the other issue is you guys mentioned the very small net of people that Indiana was going after. And I think part of the reaction and the disappointment to Ledlum choosing Tennessee is, from people like me who liked the player and even with the awkward fit felt that it was, going to be better for the program to get him rather than not get him. it's also understanding that there's not a whole lot behind that. Like if you get Ledlum, you can kind of exhale and it's like, okay, this might not be perfect. We still have questions on the wing, but we've locked up a couple of top 55 guys in the portal. We're going into next year with a competitive team. You know, we got to find a guard and maybe CJ can step up or, you know, you start. I think everybody would just feel a little bit more comfortable. Now you're looking at it's like, man, we got two big holes on the roster. Unless you want to assume that, you know, a CJ Gunn or a Caleb Banks or one of those guys is going to be ready to step into it. And obviously Trey Galloway could be that guy. But I think everybody's vision, you know, was something a little bit more than that. You know, not just, hey, can we get Cormac Ryan or Chris Ledlum? Can we get Ledlum and Connect or Ryan? And now with none of those coming through, I think that's where, you know, some of the concern comes in. And I think it's warranted, and I share it. And the biggest reason why I share it is, you know, Coach, something that we talked about as we went through the season. You know, as we watch games go by where Miller Kopp was shooting 45% from three and getting 3 attempts. You know, and Coach Whitson is saying things like, it's not my job to run plays for Miller Kopp. And all of these things that, you know, maybe in you know, an individual comment or an individual game here or there doesn't really make that big of a difference. But we talked about, you know, if you are a wing, a shooter, looking at Indiana right now, what is the case to come to Indiana outside of the coaching staff telling you we're going to play differently next year? Because for 2 straight years, it's been very post and lead guard heavy. Totally understandable why, because that's been the strength of your team. But I find myself wondering, with Indiana unable to get any traction with Timberlake, unable to get Connect on campus, you know, the Ryan thing didn't really go anywhere. Ledlum doesn't come. Like all the wings that they prioritized, it didn't really go very well. And what is the reason for that? You know, we've been told, I think Jeff Robjohn said on the Twitter Spaces that they did, that Tennessee was playing the, hey, you know, the Big Ten plays tackle basketball card with Ledlum, you know, and he didn't like that, even though, ironically, he would have been a good fit in a system like that, but he didn't want that. Is it coincidence? Is it just these other teams have more relationships with these guys than we do? Or is there something where we just are not an attractive destination for a versatile wing? You know, who has designs on being more than just a low usage player who gets the scraps from the big men. I don't know. You know, I mean, we mentioned it during the season. Certainly the evidence right now is kind of pointing to something, and I don't know what it is, but whatever the reason is, I'm not panicking, but I'm officially concerned by our inability to gain traction with some of these transfer portal wings. Because this is a season when we really needed to get some, and we're just not getting very far down the road with a lot of them. And that's where, even if some of these other names pop, okay, you know, and we have a lot to offer those guys in terms of playing time and NIL and all of that stuff. But if there's something just systemic that is keeping us from gaining traction, that's going to be a problem with those guys too. And I don't know the answer to it. I just know it's something that we've all discussed, you know, privately and on the show for a while now. And now we're starting to get some evidence that it could be a bit of an issue.
Yeah, and with all of this, whatever anyone's narrative is, you can go find pieces of information to fill your narrative. If you think this is going great, you can say this is happening and Woodson's the greatest coach, and you would be correct in those pieces that prove that way. And if you think the offense and other things are not so good, and basically what that tells me is that this is still a coach in his second or third year developing a philosophy and developing relationships, and it's not like you have some of these coaches who have been around for a long you know, Barnes, whether he can score in the postseason or not, has, you know, a veteran presence, those types of things. But you do want to start. You do have to start thinking, if I'm a wing, am I going to transfer into the Big Ten? That's one issue, period. But Terrence Shannon came in. There's some evidence that other players have come in. Michigan State has taken some transfer ups from smaller conferences, and the Walker kid, I forget what school he came from, their point guard, has turned out to be okay. You know, so is that a piece? I think if you want that to be the narrative, you can very well say that's true, because the Big Ten style of basketball isn't as pleasing as other places, right? You could also say that talk is talk, but what you've watched on film for 2 years is stand in the corner and get the leftovers. And the concern for me is, if I'm a recruit or I'm a transfer and I look at a guy like Tamar Bates, who has a lot of athletic ability, was a heralded player coming in and never really got into a groove, I may question that. And if I'm a coach who's recruiting against Indiana, I'm sure as hell bringing that up. Like, they just got where. They're going to go right back to TJD. They're going to run pick and roll with X. You're going to get limited shots. If you come to – I would really, really, really push that hard against IU. I'm not happy about that being an IU guy, but until there is some sort of proof, and that puts the burden on the coaching staff to really sell and evaluate, sell, and commit to, if they want these guys, to maybe a different way of basketball that we've kind of heard of. But there's nothing in film to show you any different. And it's hard because we had to play that way. I mean, it would be dumb not to play that way with the personnel that we had. But if you want that narrative, it is there. It is there, and it's hard to pass that up.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. We follow the program intently, right? And even we would say,
but responsibly.
I absolutely. But even we would say, well, we think it's going to be different, but we don't know. It's somewhat of a chicken and egg thing, right? So drop in somebody who's not following the program very much at all. If they go back and watch game film, look at stats and numbers of shots guys are getting, like, I don't want to say you can't blame them, but it very much is a little bit of a chicken and egg conversation, right? Like, you can say all you want that that's how you want to play. We can not even make up. You can bring up lots of reasons why IU's played the way that they have the last 2 years, and that's your sample size of Woodson. Outside of that, if he's going to convince you of anything else, he's telling you something that you haven't seen. And it doesn't, and we can sit here as followers of the program and say, well, everything points to that's how they had to play, and a lot of things point to they're not going to play that way this year. But you haven't seen it. And so, I think for some guys, until you've seen it, if I got 1 year left of college and I'm transferring somewhere, is that the dice that I'm going to roll? That all of a sudden I'm going to be different than this guy who you're bringing me in to fill in for? I think that's a hard argument. And those are ultimately the kinds of guys that IU's trying to get because they don't want to clog up roster spots for whatever. So I don't really blame people. And like Coach said, I think there's lots of ways to negatively recruit against that. Now, I also believe that there's every reason to think that the offense will be a bit different and there should be some other opportunities for guys. But I think what may end up happening is you end up having to take maybe a lesser guy than what you thought who's willing to say, hey, look, this is a chance to play at Indiana. I believe this guy. I'm going to go do whatever. And maybe it works out great, which is kind of why I'm reserving judgment a little bit of being too negative about losing Ledlum. The problem is you just don't know who that other guy is. And if they show up in exhibition game 1 next year and it's 4 out, 1 in, and they're doing all this stuff, and they're doing whatever, everybody can be like, see, I told you we were going to play different, but by then it's too late. So you gotta kind of figure it out. But that lays the groundwork for future guys that you can show them, this is what I really wanted to do. I wasn't able to because my job as the coach is to maximize the talent that I have and do the best. I did that here. And I think that tells a compelling story of somebody who can win different ways. But you got to get to that point to be able to put that story in front of somebody.
Yeah, and what it kind of nets out to for me is, every recruitment is different. And so it's not like there's one blanket narrative, Coach, to your point. There's not one blanket narrative that is causing the issues with every recruit, right? Everyone is a little bit different. But it's unquestionable that right now we are much more successful recruiting big guys than wings. And, I don't think it's a coincidence that in Woody's 2 years, he's had a lot of success developing big guys, not a whole lot of success, developing wings. Now, we haven't really gone after a lead ball handler, which we might have some success with because we have X, so that hasn't been a big need.
Well, and you have Hood in that regard. So I do think you can tell.
That's what I mean. Like we have a story to tell there.
Yeah.
But what we've seen is that when Indiana's really zeroed in on a talented big guy, they've gotten him, right? They got Khalil Ware. Peyton Sparks was begging to come here. And, where this strategy of, not casting a wide net really hurts you is if you don't land those guys, you end up where we're at right now, where there's still time left in the portal, but can any of you guys state a name that we're in on right now? Like, there isn't one. And so it almost feels like being very selective with big guys is smart. I mean, Jalen DeLoach I mean, it seemed like he really wanted to come here. It's like, well, we don't really have any more spots. And so you can be selective with those guys because you have a story to tell them that is compelling. But with the wings, I mean, we may have to really widen our net and just go after a lot of guys and try to increase our odds of finding a guy that is going to be, kind of willing to come here and take a chance on this offense. And I tend to think that's a smarter recruiting strategy anyway. And there's some data to back that up. But I think specifically with what we're doing right now, the inability to even get some of these guys on campus, we may have to be a little bit less selective and just find a guy that has some of the attributes, because at the end of the day, we need people that can fill those positions and do some of those things. And we're just not getting traction with them.
Yeah, and I'm gonna come back at you a little bit on. It's really not important for us to know if anyone is involved. I mean, the staff and Adam Howard and Jordy Hulls, I guarantee you they're involved with a lot of players that we don't know, either
absolutely.
by a phone call or whatever. So there's
but
a
none of
difference
those guys
too,
have visited yet is the issue.
No, they haven't visited. But really, it's one of those that, like, we don't need to know. It's not our business to know, and that doesn't mean that Indiana's staff is not doing their job. And I mean, if they didn't have 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, and already made phone calls to all of those, then we have a problem. But we're not going to sit here and know at the assembly call if who we're involved with. Right. I'm guaranteeing that. That's the point I'm making. When the information comes out, we all just jump on that one, and then or a known commodity that's in, like the Ryan kid. We need to do our due diligence to say, yeah, they're working hard. It may turn out to not be good, or we may critique it as not being a successful run. But man, they're busting their rear ends every day, especially now that Ledlum doesn't. They're in there, and we'll know when we know. So I just
it's not an effort problem. It's just
right.
The strategy is biting us in the butt a little bit, because we're about to have one of the greatest showcases for the IU campus that you can, which is Little 5. We don't have any recruits coming. That's the thing. So I know there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, but we're not far enough down the road yet to have any of these guys on campus, when we really need to fill these holes. And so that's where people are concerned about that. I share that concern. And that's where, okay, now we haven't.
But you're about to read a list of players. But you're about to read a list of players that were pretty good that came into the portal after April 20th. So
yes,
there's still time.
But it's a two-part thing. There can be some guys who come, but the point that we're talking about is, even with some of these guys who are out there, we're not getting traction with them. And that's why I'm saying we may just need to widen our net a little bit and try and just get more guys on campus. Because we're having trouble matching the sales pitch to the player, and we may just need more reps and more opportunities. So let's read that list. And I want to credit Hoosier Dog VA. I saw this on Peegs because I was going to go do this research myself, and I was very glad that he did it. So here's a list. So you've got Ricky Council IV. He went from Wichita State to Arkansas, I think.
And this is
correct.
I don't know if we said this. This is a list of people who went in the portal after the 20th last year.
Yes, after April 20th of last year. So it's just.
I think we alluded to that, but I didn't know we said it, so just wanted to.
No, you're right. You're right. And so this is just, guys who came in after April 20th to give you an idea of the level of player that could still come out. Baylor Shireman, April 24th. Davion Harmon, April 26th. Malachi Smith. Kevin McCullough, who ended up playing at Kansas, transferred from Texas Tech. Osanuyi, Isaiah Mosley, Pete Nance, Keon Brooks, Matthew Meyer, who went to Illinois. So those are some good players. And again, there's been a lot of chatter that some more good players will come out. I expect that to happen. Again, I think that's why it's not time to panic. But those of you who are concerned about our inability to gain traction with wings, I share it. We're kind of throwing out some ideas here for why that might be happening. The most important thing is this, the staff has to figure out what that is. And look, maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe. I tend to think it's a little bit more than that, but those spots need to be filled. It's not like it would be the worst thing in the world to enter next season, thinking that, okay, Trey's going to man one of the starting spots and then it's either CJ or Caleb. We all believe in those guys long term. But, there's a lot of risk in terms of those guys needing to develop and do things we haven't seen yet. And so that's where having a guy, even at a lower level, who's done it, makes you feel a little bit better about the floor being raised for next season. So that to me is just the main issue, Coach, that we're having trouble getting traction with these guys. And so a lot of these names are going to come out, and there's going to be less big dogs there to compete with. And so that's good. But we've got to figure out how to sell that a little bit better. And it just seems like it's a bit of a challenge 2 years in to sell the hope and the vision that isn't actually there on film through 2 years.
Yeah, and the timing issue is going to be interesting. Those names are very good players who entered late, and then a lot of this is when guys enter, you want to grab. It's that speed dating, so you get on them real quick, and then they're two guys that you like, and then they go elsewhere, and it makes you kind of look bad too. And I have some issues with the direction of the team in some ways, but I think it's been an overall positive. And we just got caught up where we had to fill 5 spots in 1 year, and that's difficult to do. And I think you're just witnessing a little bit of the ups and downs, but I'm not really worried. I mean, technically, we have 4 starters back and 3 outstanding players in Ware, Renew, and X. Obviously, they have to play at levels, their highest levels, but you give me those 3 dudes, those are 3 dudes right there. And yes, you want some more. You got 3 spots open, so you want a little depth at the 2 and the 3. But Trey Galloway had a really good year. The one thing that I'm doing is I'm not falling in love with new guys. Like, everyone loves the backup quarterback, right? Until the backup quarterback comes in and doesn't play well, right? Everyone clamors for that. Everyone wants the portal guys to come in from, South Dakota State because they averaged 18 points there, and they're going to come into Big Ten. And we got guys. Galloway can play the game. I think Coach Marlowe would agree with me on that. I think Gunn. Those guys do need to develop. I think Cups is going to be. You can't rely on freshmen. We all hear that, but I think sometimes we don't spend enough time talking about those guys as a piece of this, that it's automatically going to be the 5 portal guys come in and dominate the roster, and these other guys are just going to sit around for another year. I have a little – I'm not as concerned right now because of the Ware and Renew and X. I'm really more concerned about X getting his waiver. Like, if that doesn't happen, then we're in a deep issue. But give me – those are 3 outstanding starters. So, I mean –
all right, I'm going to push back for just a minute. There's no reason to not have hope on X right now. So I think everybody's feeling positive on X. I agree. That needs to be done. Renew and Ware are excellent talents. They're guys who project to make big jumps from freshman to sophomore. But there's still a lot of questions about both those guys. Malik couldn't stay on the court last year, and Khalil Ware had a lot of issues with motor. Now, it's the offseason, and we do tend to talk ourselves into the best versions of these guys, but there's still risk even with those 2 guys. And so I think that's where finding some more proven production, I think, is just what a lot of people
proven
are looking
where?
for to raise.
At Northern Colorado, who didn't play any defense, or a 5?
Production. Yeah,
a
it's 5
that drove post players. I mean,
yes, it's not.
I
to
understand
say
what you're
still
saying.
Questions with those guys.
It's
But I
proven.
just think, but we need.
David Jenkins came to Purdue, averaged 18 points a game. David Jenkins came to Purdue and played 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think we just got to be careful, fall in love with these points per game, rebound stats from smaller schools going to come in and bring Indiana to the Final Four. Like,
no one's saying about the Final Four. I want to raise
No,
the
I know,
floor to
but-
NCAA tournament level.
But
That's what I'm saying.
it is. Everyone loves the portal guys. The portal guys are going to be the starters, and we are going to forget Trey Galloway. He needs to be coming off the bench. I mean, yeah, we want good guys to come here and build the roster because a deeper roster is going to help Indiana. But I still think we're okay. I don't think we're in trouble. The shooting is still a concern of mine, a huge concern of mine, and the style of play is a huge concern. But we got 3 guys that are really, really good that a lot of teams in the Big Ten are going to have trouble playing against, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think we're mostly aligned here. It's just, and Andy, you can come in and have the last word on this. There's some clear weaknesses that we would like to improve. Everybody loves Trey Galloway. I still think Trey Galloway's best role is as, coming off the bench as that energy guy. And I think you're going to be hard-pressed to compete for a Big Ten title and go deep in the tournament if you're relying on him to start. And so can you find pieces that make your lineup more dynamic, that give you more options, that allow guys to settle into proper roles, where you're not everybody's excited about CJ Gunn. Do we want to rely on CJ Gunn to score 12, 13 points a game for the offense to work? I mean, I want to see him get time to develop, but I want to make sure that we keep the momentum going next season. And that's where more proven production would seem to help that. It's not to say these guys can't develop and then we might not be okay anyway, but Andy, where do you fall on it?
I guess I'm probably a little bit closer to coach, I guess. I think the challenge is it's just an unknown. So you're not going to end up only with what you have today, but you're not going to end up with this idealized version of what we thought it could be. When you're like, well, if we get this guy and this guy and this guy, think how good it's going to be. You probably weren't ever going to get to that point anyway. And so, on the spectrum of, this is not going to happen, but they don't sign anybody else. Yeah, there's huge holes on this team. You are counting in a massive way on guys to step up from what they did a year ago. You're not going to end up that desperate for that, I guess, if you will. But you're clearly at a point now where you're not getting the guys who you have at the top of your shopping list in the portal that you think are really going to elevate your roster. So the question is, who do you actually get to do that, and how do they fit with what you have? And that's where you want to have the immediate answer of what feels, how you feel about it. You just really can't, because at this point you're not getting your best case scenario, and you're not going to have your worst case scenario where you don't sign anybody else. It's a matter of what you can do in the middle. I think no matter what, I think to a certain extent that tips based on you are now more reliant than you wanted to be on Banks and Gunn to have to take a jump. But
yes,
if they do that, then if one of them, I think in an ideal world, you're like, okay, I need one of them to do more. Now you probably need more out of both, but I don't know that that's unreasonable to believe, but I think it's just the unknown. There's just a lot of different permutations at this point of who you're going to get that could make you feel, a decent amount better and whatever else. And I think that's magnified by the fact that you really don't have a good understanding of what the playing style is going to be to go, to tie it back to what we talked about before. If you told me you got you bring in two guys who may have scored 8-9 points a game somewhere, but hit 42% from three. Okay. I'd probably take it, because if I'm going down the road of this team's going to be 4 out, 1 in, I need those guys to shoot. Maybe they're willing to take a small role, but are guys who can knock down open shots if they get them, but haven't had massive production someplace else and fill a role in the team, then I think you could feel okay about it. You just don't know. But I think they have to be pretty selective at this point about the skill sets that they need, not necessarily about the players to go after. We talked about that a lot in terms of but I'm going after guys who do this one or two things and then really hone in on that. I think Ledlum was interesting because he could potentially do a lot of things. I think now you need to get, I don't want to say like true specialists, if you will, but the shooting has got to be the first thing that you hear about. Probably the next guy that you sign. Yeah. The first thing you should read about him is this guy can really shoot it. I think that's kind of so I think I kind of look at it that way, as what is the top couple traits that you have, and how can you fill in that, and you're going to have to rely more than you wanted to in an ideal world on the guys who are going to be sophomores, but you recruited them for a reason. You're in the position to develop them for a reason. So it's a situation that you've created that you've got to figure out how to make the best of as a staff and as a program.
I think, Andy, you said what I probably really should have said, is like, I'm for the skills. I don't need the top players or a 20 ranked kid or a guy that got 18 points or whatever. We need those things that we're missing, that we missed last year. We got a Renew who I think is going to be a lot better, and we have a heck of a point guard. We don't have those wing shooters and drivers. So regardless of where they're ranked or whatever, and that's where I say, not you, Jared, my conversation was not towards you, Jared, but more to the Indiana fan in general, that we don't need to come in and have 5 starters that average 15, 18 or dominant in their leagues but we do need skills. And then the question for me for the coaching staff is, what skills are you going after, and what style of play do you need to play? And a lot of those things could end up in who's the kid from Florida State, the 6'7" kid, Cleveland. He only averaged 10 points a game. Never heard about him until I read the athletic thing. Didn't know he was in the portal. Who shot 33, 34%, maybe a little bit better. Those are the things where I do believe the staff is, if they're doing their job right, they have identified those guys for those needs. And we might be underwhelmed by the name of the player, but until you see it all fit, and I guess that's where I was going towards is, I think we have a good foundation now. We just need to add some pieces. I'm not sure we need to hit the home runs. We hit the home run with Ware, the second best guy, top 5 recruit, an NBA type player. That's the home run that elevated our program. Now we need to go get those specific. Andy, you said it a lot better than I did, but I agree.
No, I agree with that.
I follow the Reds. I don't understand your baseball analogy of this home run, but you can explain it to me during the break, maybe.
I will.
Yeah, no, I mean, and look, and Coach, I agree with that. I like our foundation. I think now we need guys that have some specific skills. The more dynamic that they can be, the better. But we certainly need to get shooting. We need guys who can bring that offensive punch. My worry is just we're struggling to get traction with those guys. And so, we've got to find a way to get those guys on campus and sell them in a different way, because we do need to add some more of that skill to the roster for next year, if for no other reason than to have depth and to have, more options. Because that's the problem. That's the thing that we see is – we go and, we talk about in the offseason, like last offseason, we talked a lot about, hey, what could Tamar become? What could Jordan Geronimo become? And unfortunately, those guys didn't really develop. But hey, look, Trace got even better. And Trey Galloway developed in ways that people didn't realize. And so I think when you start talking about projection and guys getting better for next season, I mean, if you can get a 50% hit rate on guys developing in meaningful ways, that's pretty good, especially for this program in recent history. But as it stands right now, you're going to need a higher percentage than that. My goal is just let's get some guys who have a little bit of that proven skill to increase your odds of making sure that you actually get it on the court, because that's going to make us better for next season, give us more options, and hopefully make everybody better. So look, it's an interesting time in the portal right now for Indiana. The getting Khalil Ware was huge, getting Peyton Sparks was important. Now we got to fill some of these wing slots, and unfortunately we've swung and missed. But hopefully we'll get a lot more opportunities at the plate here over the next few weeks, and can do better as I continue to use the baseball metaphor just to really confuse Andy down there. Anything else on this? I mean, obviously, I'm sure we could probably dive into it more, and there'll be plenty of time to talk about it on future shows. Anything else on Ledlum, the staff's philosophy, that you guys want to cover here before we head to the mailbag?
The only other thing that you brought up, and that this was a potential thing used in the Ledlum piece, is the Big Ten and the style of play. That's not going away. So you're going to have to figure out a way to recruit around that one way or the other. And I think part of that can be, again, if you go out and the offense looks different next year, you have that story to tell, because I think other teams can have that story to tell, even if the league is what the league is, but you have, wings who have, been successful in the league and be able to put up numbers and things like that. So I don't think it's a death sentence for guys. I don't think it helps. And I think the combination of that and not really showing your own ability to use those guys in creative ways doesn't help. There's one of those things you can control and one of them that you can't, right? So that really, becomes important to figure out what the offense is going to look like. And the more seasons you stack where it becomes harder for guys to visualize themselves playing an integral role or being able to display their versatility, that becomes a problem. But I think for now you can explain it away a little bit based on the construct of the roster. But that, I really think after this next year, that goes away. And so the opportunity to flip that a little bit becomes really important, because the Big Ten, unless they make dramatic changes in how it's officiated or other aspects of it, the style of play is not going to change in a meaningful way, no matter how much we all want it to.
Yep. That's a good final point to end on here, Andy. All right. It is time now for our mailbag. We got a bunch of really good questions, some serious, some kind of funny and whimsical, and we will get to a bunch of those next. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call.
A home run, Andy, is when your team swings at the baseball and the ball goes over the outfield fence. It kind of happens a lot at Great American Ballpark.
I've seen other teams do that with regularity there, so I guess I am familiar with it.
That reminded me of the Baylor player explaining what a rebound is in the NCAA tournament.
Reach up and grab it with 2 hands.
Okay,
I want to shout out. Dale Ficklin in the chat. It's the first time I've seen his name. I met him at a baseball game. He came up. We were both out in the outfield. I think he was laughing at me because I ran and hid behind the foul pole on a home run ball. And then he came up and kind of made me feel all right. But Dale, good to see you again. It was great talking to you. Hope to see you again at Bart Kaufman.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Well, let's hop into the mailbag questions. It's already
okay. Sounds good.
Here
I probably got
show.
10 or 15 minutes. I feel like I've seen my wife for approximately 8 minutes today. So,
okay. Well,
we're just like ships passing in the night. Oh, you're taking this kid here as I come in the door, and then we leave and do whatever. Yeah. So that's where we're at today. So, one of those days.
You get an official visit here before she enters.
One of those days. But yeah, we can't have that.
No. All right. Here we go.
Hi, it's Thomas Bryant. What's the only thing better than being Kentucky in the NCAA tournament? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Thomas. One of the Hoosiers still alive in the NBA playoffs. Good luck to him playing with the Nuggets, right? Isn't Thomas on the Nuggets now? He was on the Lakers earlier, and then I think he got traded to the Nuggets. Unless I'm way off, and then someone can tell me. But I think that's the case.
I don't follow the NBA well enough to correct you, so sure, that sounds good.
Let's roll with it. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. It is time for our mailbag. All of these questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community. You can learn more about that and join us at assemblycall.com/community. Let's go to Kevin's question first. For the portal, why would a kid wait to put their name in? I've started wondering this of late as I keep hearing we might still be in the early stages of the portal. I think there are a number of reasons why that might happen. Some guys are exploring their NBA potential, and maybe they get an answer they don't like, so they come in, but they still have time and they decide to put their name in the portal to go to a different school. I think sometimes, an opportunity might open up at a certain school, whether it's for playing time, whether it's for increased NIL money that maybe a guy didn't see before that happens now. In some cases, a guy may be on a current roster, and based on the other players that team is bringing in, maybe he feels like he's being recruited over, and so he decides to enter. So I think, Andy, it's just this time is so much in flux with rosters and information, and then especially with NIL, if you get a hint, it's like with Indiana, okay, a team now becomes a little bit more desperate for a certain position, and maybe there's contact there. So there's a lot of reasons, I think, as this stuff plays out, opportunities change. And that can mean then, for an individual player, their calculus on whether to stay or go could change. There's just a whole lot of stuff in flux. And so I think that's why you can see some of these things happen a little bit later.
Yeah, I think probably the one that immediately came to mind for me was the third one that you said where, hey, somebody else just signed here that limits my opportunity for growth or different things like that, or you kind of feel like there's writing on the wall and in some regards with that. So I think
like Logan Duncombe looking at Peyton Sparks and Khalil Ware coming in, he's probably not going to think, oh yeah, I'm going to get a lot of playing time next year.
Yeah. So I think that was the one that immediately came to mind for me. I do think there's some of those NBA draft decisions that, hey, if a guy comes back, how does that impact me? But it's all largely to me related to, kind of roster changes over the course of time, largely on the team that the player is a part of. But I do think there's maybe a bit of an outward focus, like you said, of being able to look and say, you know what, there might be an opportunity here. I could put my name in, potentially come back, but at least gives me the chance to explore some of the some things that might be out there. So I think it's more limited for sure, because I think guys who are clearly disgruntled or ready to move on to a higher level or just ready to move on, period, those guys are kind of ready as soon as the season gets over. And so that's why you have this mass influx there. But then as the dust settles from what happens with some of those things, I think it becomes that way. And I think you even saw that with, to a certain extent, a little bit of that with a guy that committed to Wisconsin, whose name is escaping me, but he's already kind of backed out of that commitment because
Reynolds, I think.
Yeah. So either somebody didn't leave that he thought was going to leave, something happened there where the situation wasn't what he expected it to be, and looked at it differently and kind of changed his mind on wanting to make that decision. So, but I think if, a handful of reasons, certainly, the bulk of the players enter early on, but I do think you'll see a little bit of movement here. And you just got so many players in there at this point. There's so many dominoes left to fall.
By the way, I do have some insight on Reynolds. He went to Wisconsin, and they gave him the 500-page manual for how to flop, how to travel without it being called, and that wasn't the kind of basketball he wanted to play, so he left.
Do you guys think there's a little of the recruiting going the other way in a delay? Because I agree with all of you. I think it's roster mainly, or figuring out NBA stuff. I think that's the main reasons. But do you think it's someone sitting there going, I have a skill set, and I'm going to call 5 or 6 schools and see what kind of money I can get, and if not, I'm happy where I'm at. But if I'm making $400,000 here, but I can get $1 million somewhere else, then I'll put my name in after the fact. No need to put my name in because I'm directing the recruitment. I don't want 45 schools calling me. I'm going to call 2 or 3 or have my people. I wonder if that is now part of this NIL. I don't know any stories like that, but if that's a delay, maybe there's a delay too. It's a two-way street. If you can market yourself that way, and you run the risk of having someone find out, and there's a lot of negatives to trying to do that as well, but I just wonder.
Could be. Definitely could be, especially with the kind of money that can be had moving up a level. Coach, why don't you take this one from Jim Tom Hoosier? We seem to be totally locked in on the portal right now, talking about adding starters. Are you assuming none of the upcoming sophomores or new recruits have a chance of starting next year?
No, and I saw that question in the chat. What was I arguing? My point is for all of us to understand, we still have players on the roster. So, and technically, we have 4 starters, if you think so. I know Renew wasn't a starter, but we have 4 starters. So it's not – you can go out and get pieces. If someone wants to transfer up like a Peyton Sparks and come in and as a shooter and can come in for 15 minutes and shoot that 42 like Andy said, that might not be the big name or the top 150 guy in the portal, but they're 250th in the portal, but they're a drop-down, dead-eye shooter. So I think we really – all we need is maybe one. If we're not sure, Caleb Banks' development is a big issue. So I'd say we would need one more starter out of the 3 definitively, because I'm comfortable with Galloway. That was what my point was, is that I don't think it's so desperate that we have 3 portal guys come in and start with Renew and X next year, and the guys that we had are all going to be in backup roles. I think it's just going to be fair game, and it might even be better if you get guys in who have to compete than So that's my point. Yes, we have 3 spots open. We will fill them. We need to fill them. I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying I don't know in my mind that they need to be 3 outstanding top 50 in the portal, must start and contribute guys. I think we have enough of a foundation that if what Andy said, we piece it together, that still could be keeping that momentum that you're talking about, and I agree with.
Look, and we've underestimated Trey Galloway for 3 straight off seasons. He's always outplayed what we thought he was going to do. And so I would not have any problem if we do enter next season with him as a starter. I'll believe that he's probably going to take another step because that he's going to play well. I think we have to be a little bit careful with CJ and Caleb and keep our expectations in check. A lot of guys do, Andy, make a jump from freshman to sophomore. A lot of the guys who make the big jump, right? Like, you think about a Jaden Ivey or Johnny Davis. Remember a couple years ago, the Big Ten had several guys who jumped from their freshman to sophomore year. I think Keegan Murray was one. But all those guys, and I'm not saying anybody is expecting CJ or Caleb to do that, but all those guys showed a lot as freshmen. Now, Caleb and CJ showed some flashes, but didn't get a whole lot of time. They profile more as the kind of guys who become consistent rotation players as sophomores, and then are your more consistent contributors as juniors and seniors. Could they become that as sophomores? Yes. I'm just saying history suggests it's a little bit less likely. Jen, I saw her question in the chat. What do you expect from CJ next year? Well, CJ didn't do much statistically this season. He averaged like 1 or 2 points and shot 8% from three-point range. The thing to remember about CJ is when you look at the history of all the guys who have taken the number of three-point shots he took, which was like 28, I think, or 24, it was more than 1 per game, and shot that poor of a percentage, there's been like 13 or 14 of them in the last 20 years of college basketball. 6 or 7 of them, again, shot less than 10% at more than 1 shot, 1 three-pointer per game. Half of them didn't even play college basketball the next season, so they clearly probably just weren't very good. Of all the ones who stayed and played another season of college basketball, the average was they shot like 36% from three-point range on increased volume. So typically, even if a guy shoots that bad of a percentage, the fact that he's continuing to get shots is a suggestion he's a good shooter. It's just not showing up because of a small sample size or a struggle to, adjust to college basketball. But I think if you're looking at CJ, the most likely outcome is, he plays 15, 16 minutes, averages 6 or 7 points a game, gets that three-point shooting up. That, I think, is a fair expectation of his development curve. Where I think it might be a little bit of time to panic is if you have to pencil a guy like that in as a starter and expect starter-level production. It's possible, and maybe you speed up his development curve with all the extra playing time. That could very well happen. But I think you're probably not going to be as good next year as you want to be. And that's where some of this push and pull comes from for people who really believe in those guys long term, but just don't necessarily want to count on them quite so early next season.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to frame it, that maybe the positive is that really accelerates it, but I also think you're putting those guys in a difficult position, and one that they would probably relish, the chance to be able to play more and do some of those things. But realistically, for a team that had the injuries they had at times last year and played as tight of a rotation as they did, it's hard not to read into a little bit of, again, this goes back to is this a Mike Woodson thing or is this about them? But I there's a part of me that finds it hard to believe if the staff really believed they were ready for more minutes last year, it's hard to believe they wouldn't have got them based on what opportunities did exist. That doesn't mean they were doing anything wrong. I think that means they're typical freshmen that are probably ranked about where they were in recruiting rankings, where they're not guys that you would pencil in even as freshmen to be a core member of your rotation. So I don't mean that to badmouth them in any way, but I do think if there were opportunities there, and there certainly were minutes that at times guys either weren't performing, you had injuries, you needed to give guys rest, and they didn't typically get those minutes in games that were meaningful. And so it is a big ask of them to jump and do that. I think they both showed flashes enough to allow you to be optimistic for that. It wasn't like they came and showed nothing, and then it's like, holy crap, there's no way they're going to be able to do whatever. But being able to perform at a higher level in more consistently in a larger amount of minutes is a big ask of anyone in that, in that position. And so I think, if you're placing bets, you on the number of them that, really take a big leap, I don't think you'd probably take both. That seems like, just something that is unlikely to happen historically in college basketball, not just at IU. It doesn't have anything to do with that. And I think with what you've done in the front court, you've given Banks at least a little bit of a safety net there where he can slide in, play some minutes at the 4, but not be counted on for big minutes there, can play some minutes at the 3. I think you've got a little bit of a safety net for him to know that you're not going to have to thrust him into that. Right now, as we look at the roster, I don't think you have that for CJ Gunn. And, both seem like really good kids who are going to work hard in the summer. It can point to success stories of guys who really changed their game and became more consistent in that. It's just kind of a playing the percentages thing, and how often does that really happen? And is it reasonable to expect not one but two guys to do that? Feels like a stretch.
Yep.
So
all right,
I got a question real quick, though.
Yeah.
You said CJ can possibly average 6 to 7 points a game next year. Is that correct?
I think that would
Miller
be a fair
Kopp-
expectation.
Miller Kopp averaged 8.1 as a starter. Now, there's a much bigger question about, Kopp's experience, what he did better. I don't think CJ's starter material necessarily. I don't know that Caleb is. Would it be great if they developed into that right away? But I do think they have the skill set, the length, the hustle, the long arms that modern basketball is. And if they are ready to play at high levels, as soon as that is, I think I put somewhere in the community or a text, is it at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, or maybe at the end of their sophomore year, we all of a sudden have two dudes that fit that mold. That's why I'm high on them. I understand that we probably need at least one starter in the portal for that 3 or 2 spot and move Galloway or whatever. But we had 3 starters that averaged 8.4, 8.1, and 6.7. So if we believe CJ Gunn can get 6 to 8 points a game, that is starter production, at least in the offense that was last year, right? Your X is going to get a lot of run, and the forwards are going to get a lot of points and a lot of usage. You're looking at the 4th or 5th most used position as well. I think it's going to end up being split with a couple people. Is the point where I do think they will contribute next year, whether it's starting or not. I don't know that they need to take that. They do need to take a big leap, but I think they're going to get it done. And that's where all of this ties together for me as a coach, that I think we have some pieces there to work with. We need someone to come in and complement CJ and Caleb in those roles.
Yep. And hopefully we can find that. Jared asks, what is our plan B and C for filling the final 3 scholarship spots? I don't know. I mean, it's obviously hard work, and
I recognize the spelling is different, but was that you submitting your own question just to try to? Okay.
I thought that when I saw the run sheet
that
too.
I have no answer to.
Yeah.
No. So anyway, we don't know what that plan is. Michael asked, what do you think is the biggest factor in what seems to be difficulty attracting wings in the portal? I think we talked about that. The many, many reasons behind that. So let's hit one of these fun questions here before we get out of here, Andy. We want to protect your marriage, so we're going to let you get out of here shortly. Amy's in the chat saying nice things about Coach under a pseudonym, so we don't need to worry about her. Okay, let's go with Jonathan's question. He says, Bob Knight, Branch McCracken, and Mike Woodson are coming over for dinner. Tom Crean, very upset that he did not get an invite to that one. What do you have the most confidence in making for them from scratch? Coach, what are you making for those 3 coaches?
Well, I know what Woodson wants. He said it in a press conference. He wants a big-ass pot of chili. And I can make that from scratch. So we're having a big-ass pot of chili.
Big-ass pot of chili. Okay. Andy, what are you cooking for those esteemed coaches?
Boy, I don't know. I'd probably grill something. Would be my guess. Maybe some. I don't know how much time I got. If I wanted to hang out with them for longer, I could smoke ribs. That would take a good few hours, and then you could really kind of have a few drinks while we wait on that. So I would probably grill or smoke something would be my guess.
Now, obviously, I'm sure you would just kind of want to be a fly on the wall and just listen to them talk. But if you did get an opportunity to toss a question in for discussion, what question would you throw in?
Is that to me or Andy?
Either one.
Go ahead,
I
Andy.
figured you both would need to think about it
thanks,
a little bit.
Thanks, Coach, for letting me go first. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Boy, I don't know. That's a tough one. Probably be something more Knight related, I would guess, just because of kind of being the coach during my formative years. I mean, if it was right now, I'd probably ask Woodson some questions about the portal and what's going on there. But I think this is a general question. I don't know. Probably be something either with Knight about some of those early '90s teams and some of kind of what he saw in those guys that maybe weren't as heralded. I mean, as a Calbert Chaney guy, what did you see in him as a guy who wasn't as highly recruited as so many guys in that class that really gave you reason to believe he was such a good fit or things like that. Probably asked him some questions about coaching Jordan and what he saw in him in the Olympics. I think that might be interesting to get his perspective on that too.
I think one question that would be interesting for that group in particular is, outside of the 1975 team, what is the best IU team that didn't win a title? Because they all were kind of involved with, some of those teams that we talk about with missing banners. I would love to hear a debate on that, what they would say.
Obviously, I'd go to some. There's a couple like how important is leadership, inward leadership, player-led teams. And the other one was what was your most satisfying accomplishment as a coach with a player? Not necessarily wins or losses or total wins or losses, but what one thing that you accomplished with a player that you feel really good about that individual win? I asked a football coach here, a famous football coach, Hall of Fame football coach. I said, what happens if you don't have a player-led team? He goes, you lose. It was like, it's just you lose. Okay.
Very simple.
Very simple.
I'll tell you, the other question that I would love to ask Branch McCracken and Bob Knight is, if you coached today with the transfer portal, how much do you think you would have had to change to be successful? Could you have been as intense and all that stuff if it was a little bit easier for guys to leave? I would love to know what they would say. Maybe they would say, screw it, I would do it the same way. But it would be interesting. I stumbled upon this video of Coach Knight talking about Larry Bird. And you don't often see Coach Knight in kind of self-reflecting, admitting mistakes. And he really, he just basically said, like, I wish I had understood his situation better. Kind of like, I wish I had empathized a little bit more and communicated better to try and make that work. And I think it would be interesting because, we know Coach Knight was stubborn, but he also wanted to win. And certainly, it's, you couldn't just take him from then and plan him in here. He probably would have had to come up with this system and kind of gradually change with it. But it'd be interesting to know just what he would say about how he might change. Because I think he would have had to change, if it was easy for guys to transfer, some guys might not have put up with it. And that enters into a whole other debate of whether, not requiring guys to sit out is good or not. But when it's your reality, you might have to change a little bit to make sure that you keep your best players around. So, man, times have changed. That is for sure. All right, let's get out of here. We have some other good questions here. We're not ignoring them or forgetting them. We have them on the run sheet, so we will answer them in a future episode of Assembly Call Radio. But that will do it for us on this episode. If you want to see us do the show live, you can join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call Radio recording. As always, we thank Bob Thompson for producing our music, and thank you to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. And as always, thank you for listening, and thank you to everyone who is here live tonight on Thursday. We'll be back to talk IU Hoops again with you next week. Until then.
Take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Here I come. This is Stunt Sony.
See, this team could use Robert Johnson. Guy can play defense,
could use a
knock down shots, but wouldn't be a guy who would have put up huge numbers anyplace else, but would do well to fill a role on this team.
That's the thing with the portal, man. Fit is everything. It is about fit. Can you find guys who fit?
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm calling it a night.
Cool.
Good,
Thanks for
good
being
chatting
here,
with you, fellas. And
yes, you as well.
Good night, Andy.
Hopefully more and better news to hit next week.
Let's have a surprise emergency podcast sometime next week.
There you go. That would be good.
Why not?
All right. Take it easy, guys.
Cool. See everybody. And if you're in Bloomington, be safe this weekend. Have lots of fun. But
take care of each other.
Be safe. Yes, exactly. Take care of each other. 100%. All right, Coach, any final thoughts from you before we wrap up here?
Nah, life's good. I tell you, that baseball team's fun, man. It's just fun. This was interesting. I don't mean to take your time, but I sat right behind the dugout. Obviously, people saw me on TV, but right behind Mercer and listened to him lead his team. Fascinating to be that close from a coaching perspective, and real positive, encouraging, and just the amount of detail, the pitching staff and the coaches that are moving players in positions. I know they got really stung with the portal or with the COVID thing, and had a tough rebound. That really set them back in his second year. But, man, he doesn't have a great pitching staff, but it's getting better. The kids are improving, the energy, and just listening to I really appreciate Ari and Josh covering the team and getting media availability for us in the community. If you're not in the community, you need to join, because just listen to Coach Mercer talk, and you can tell someone who has a plan, has a way of playing, and wants to play that, and really appreciates the young men in his program and how hard they work. He's one of my favorite coaches right now. Just following him. So, but it's also, Jared, I don't know if you've ever been to a game. I know you've probably been by there and seen it, but it is a great atmosphere. You get some nice weather and good food and beer, and just it's a lot of fun. Heck, Brent and I go down on weeknights. We drive 2 hours down and come back at 11, go to school the next day. But the baseball program is really good. But Ari, I ran into Ari at Illinois, and he just does some really good things.
He does
for us as well. And then I saw Josh went to Cincinnati yesterday, traveled. So make sure
Josh just so desperately wanted to have a decent baseball team to follow.
Yeah, he was wearing a White Sox polo last Tuesday when I saw him.
Good,
so
good for him. Got to stay strong through all the downtimes. Oh,
but no,
jeez.
All's good.
That's awesome. I'm glad they're doing well. It's great seeing so many IU sports teams.
Yeah, and I want to get to softball too, because I think she does a great job
it.
too. I mean, just fantastic. And there's so many. Again, in the stress of this portal, there's so many good things about Indiana University and Bloomington, and the patio around Kirkwood. Make sure you indulge in all of that beauty while this stress of basketball roster works its way out, because that'll help you.
I mean, we're part of the problem, doing a show every week and tweeting about it. I promise you, there is a part of me that would love to just shut things down for 3 months and just come back when the dust settles and talk about it. I find the ebbs and flows. Now, it's not a big enough part of me to actually do it, but I do find some of the ebbs and flows of this stuff, I just find it to be a little bit much. I get it, and it's kind of fun to talk about, but there's also certain parts of the discussion where it's just like, well, God, I don't know. We don't know yet. Let's just see what the roster ends up being, because all this angst may be a complete waste of time if everything works itself out. So I struggle with it. I go back and forth.
I hear you, but I do think we provide some stability. People can come here. If they have some comments, they can put them in the chat and get their thoughts out. I think we balance. We see the pros and the cons of what's going on, and it's not the shock boards or shock talk things. I just think so that's worth it for me to show up as regular as possible. You get into June and July and we have to do some which team would you then that becomes a little fun. It's not as stressful as this portal stuff, but I think it is we got to be careful not to sensationalize every single tweet or every single move. But I think we're rather fair with all that.
Yeah, no, that's what keeps us coming back is the real purpose that we have to be here is to be together with everybody. So we just
and it's much needed because we don't understand.
Right,
we don't understand what's going on, and in this day of tweeting and availability, you can get confused and up and down. I've tried to change. I've mentioned this to you guys with recruiting. Like as soon as they're on campus, now I'll get concerned with them because of the up and down nature. Like you fall in love with the kid, you hear at an AAU tournament that they're watching, and then he never comes to campus, and then you get down, and then you get up, and then you get down. And each year I tell myself not to get as involved, and then I fall back into that rabbit hole. Anyway.
All because of where a college kid decided to attend school. It's like you have no control over it. That's what I mean. Like sometimes you step back from it, and it's like, what am I worrying about here? Like, what am I reading about?
I mean, it's not like you can call zone and have a direct I mean, you do have a direct impact, but St. John's, Tennessee, and Indiana. You're playing for Woodson, a guy who played a coach in the pros. Patino, one of the greatest coaches ever, crazy and did some crazy things. Or you're in an SEC with the guy who's coached for 26. I mean, those are some good choices for Chris Ledlum.
Yep, he earned it.
But yeah, Oh well.
All right.
What's going on with you? Anything great going on with you and your family?
Taking my daughter on a father-daughter camp out this weekend. We leave tomorrow.
There we
picking her
go.
up early from school. It's going to be fun. So if anybody commits this weekend, there will be no emergency pod, at least hosted by me. It seems like I'm leaving on the right weekend because it doesn't seem like anything's happening. But anyway, that's where I will be. So that'll be fun.
I've told you guys this, you and Andy, definitely not Ryan, but I've told you and Andy, it's great to be the older guy with kids out of the house and living vicariously through you, reading to your son, and now going on your father-daughter weekend and the dance and that, and then Andy with all the timing of going to practice and driving. It just brings back all those memories. You guys, do a really good job of being really great dads, which is much needed in our society anymore. So thank you for sharing all that stuff. It's just awesome.
Absolutely.
What are you cooking? Is it like camping, or
it's not
somewhat civilized camping?
I mean, they basically, so we go with a big group. There's probably like 7 or 8 dads and their daughters that go. And so there's a big cabin that has bunk beds. It's, the bedding is not nice. It's just like a little thin mattress. So you got to bring sleeping bags and kind of bring all that stuff. So it's not glamping. Like, it's not like there's a nice place there. But then, we'll have a fire and make s'mores, and the weather should cooperate. So I think we'll be able to go out on the lake and do some of that stuff. There's activities, and it's just being outside, cooking hot dogs and burgers and running around, enjoying nature and each other. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
Well, Jim, I can't wait till I have grandkids, but my boy's got to do something first. One's got to get. Well, I guess you don't have to get married, but one's not married, and the other one, hopefully, is doing that. But no, those are good things.
Yes, Ari, I know it's not true camping. I know. We'll probably get an actual tent and go like legit camping here at some point. I've done that before. She hasn't, so we gotta toughen her up a little bit. Get her out there in the tent one of these days.
It's something one of these days. It's a good reminder too. I don't do enough of this. Getting out in nature with all the technology and all the stuff. I'm back with the fire going with my laptop, right? We all need to, get out and breathe a little fresh air every once in a while.
Less refreshing for recruiting news and more getting out in nature. We'd be. Yep. I am not a glamper. This is not glamping. It's not glamping. It's not necessarily
I didn't mean
camping.
for you to catch some heat.
It's something.
I just
it's something in between.
About your family. Dang.
It's all right.
This portal has created some.
Everybody's on edge.
They're on edge. I asked about what he's doing with his family, and now he's a glamper. And goodness gracious, we all love you guys. All right, I'm going to let you go before I ask you something else. It gets to everyone.
All right, everybody.
Yeah. Hey, one more thing. Dale's bringing up this foul pole. So Indiana's losing Tuesday, and I moved. So my son and we moved and I go out to right field, and the sun is setting, and I can't see. And all of a sudden, I see this ball hit, and I see the curve is coming right towards me. I'm just inside the foul pole, and I lose it. Like, I don't see the ball coming. So all I can think of is hide behind the foul pole fence. And if it hits the foul pole, I'm safe. But I must have looked like a big coward. Like, Dale was out there having a sandwich. My son asked me if it was a fair or foul ball. I'm like, I don't know. I just ran and ducked behind the foul pole. So the Dale just said there's no foul pole to hide in camping. And yeah, he's right. Come on, Dale. I gave you a shout-out now. Even Dale's turned a little tough on us here in the post-show. It's time to sign off.
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks since we signed the number 2 player in the portal. We need a commitment here to get everybody happy.
All good,
again.
Dale.
Come on.
Yeah. All right, Jared. Be good.
All right,
enjoy.
Everybody.
We'll see you.
I will. See you guys all next week.